External culture gets well-deserved blame for problems in our churches, but what if there's something closer to home that needs to be addressed? That's what we're looking at today on the Church Revitalization Podcast.
Hello, and welcome to the Church Revitalization Podcast, brought to you by the Malphurs Group team, where each week we tackle important, actionable topics to help churches thrive. And now, here's your hosts, Scott Ball and AJ Matthew.
Welcome to the Church Revitalization Podcast. My name is Scott Ball. I am joined by my friend AJ Matthew. And today we are brought to you by Faith Street. Faith Street is an iOS and Android app that helps bring your congregation together by creating an online community. Gets your church off of Facebook for driving community, building community, so that you can use a tool that's designed by church leaders for church leaders. Use it to prompt mindfulness, remind folks of your teaching, prayer requests, generosity, giving, all of these things that help make discipleship a habit rather than just an event. So if you want to check out Faith Street, you can get 20% off their service as a Church Revitalization Podcast listener. Go to faithstreet.com/Malphurs, faithstreet.com/Malphurs, MALPHURS, 20% off. Thanks to Faith Street for sponsoring this episode. And AJ, I have some bad news for you.
Uh-oh. Right off the top.
I mean, I know that we've had a pandemic and like culture is going nuts and there are bad things happening in the world. But the bad news is that's not the primary reason why churches struggle and decline.
Yeah, that's right. And so I'm sitting here looking at the title of our episode as I'm getting started. I'm thinking,
as are probably our listeners, knowing the answer to this already. Yeah,
our audience is church leaders, and today the title of this episode today is that church leaders are the problem. So we're not exactly endearing our audience to us at this
That's
point.
True.
Yeah.
Our one listener who decided to click on this instead of be offended. Welcome, listener. We're
right.
Glad that
you're here. You are probably a really great leader if you're willing to continue listening to an episode that says you might be the problem. You're an introspective person who is willing to be a great leader at whatever cost it is to you personally. So there you go.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, I want to before we hop into this.
You a prize. You're the one person still listening. Send us your name. We'll send you a prize.
We'll send you a prize. Yeah. Before we hop into this, I want to kind of give some context to, because I'm the one who wrote this title, so I feel like I should explain what I mean a little bit.
Yeah.
Good. The harsh truth, AJ, especially coming out of the pandemic, even before the pandemic, the majority of churches in the United States were declining. That's everyone knows this fact. I don't think that I'm sharing new information here. What may not be understood or well understood is that every church is now at a disadvantage coming out of the pandemic. You probably understand this anecdotally, but we've now done a church ministry analysis with lots of churches coming out of the pandemic. I'm not sure the exact number, but many, many, many. And every single church that we've done an assessment with has come out of the pandemic essentially one step worse in their life cycle chart than they were prior to the pandemic. So whatever trend you were in before COVID-19 got a big push by the pandemic. And so you had this huge external thing in the pandemic. And it's easy to look at that and go, well, now that that's over or coming to an end, things will go back. Go back to what though? You were already in a decline.
Yeah.
And so to blame external challenges like the pandemic is misguided. It's not really understanding where the real problem lies. And there are structural things we talk about all the time on the podcast, AJ, things about mission and values and your vision. And all those things are important. But at the end of the day, those things even pale in comparison to the one factor that every church must get right in order to thrive, and that is leadership.
Yeah. Churches rise and fall based on the leadership of the church. No doubt about it.
That's right. So if you're seeing a decline in your church, your first assumption should not be we need a better strategy. Your first assumption should be it starts with me, or it starts with my team of leaders.
Mm-hmm.
And so today, what we want to do is give 5 symptoms that church leaders are actually the problem in your church. And these are all things that we can fix. They're all things that we can modify and work on, AJ.
Yeah. And we're not saying exclusive of systems and programs and all that stuff. There's lots of pieces to healthy churches or declining churches, but leadership is always
a good place to start is with your leadership.
Yeah. Leadership's always a component. So let's jump in. Number 1 is that church leaders at the highest level are making decisions at the lowest level. So we've got an issue of being outside your bounds, outside the rails a bit in the scope of your position. And this can happen, in extreme ways. It can happen in very subtle ways. But what it comes back to, Scott, would be probably, it probably has happened for a long time. This doesn't happen overnight, and it almost never happens by design. But there's probably some scope creep on job description. And out of necessity, something happened out of necessity. Somebody said, well, I'll take care of that or that. And then it ends up just kind of being the way it is. But so what we're getting into here is maybe senior staff level, board level certainly ends up doing things that should be handled by other people in the organization. And I guess this would mostly apply to, churches. I don't know. Do you want to throw some kind of a size down, Scott, over 50? I mean, a very, very, very small church or a church plant, this is a necessity, because there's just not that many people. They're making decisions and they're working at that granular lower level. But with any size church that you've got a definitive line between board or staff and non-board and non-staff, this can be an issue in which the higher levels of leadership are doing things that lower levels should be doing.
Yeah, this is something we talk about in the leadership pipeline work that we do with churches, but there's a real sense of satisfaction that comes from getting your hands dirty. So,
yeah, sure.
You feel like you feel more involved and more connected to the work when you're out there planting flowers or whatever. And yet there are higher level leadership function things that then don't occur. And so one of the greatest leadership lessons that I think every high level leader needs to learn is this diligence to ask the question, what are the things that only I can do? And at the highest level, it's about shaping vision. It's about having a pulse on the spiritual health of the church. Those are not things that you can expect a greeter to do. They're not in the position to do it. They probably don't have the capacity to do it. They're not set up for that. So what are the things that only you can do? And while I can understand that there's a deep sense of satisfaction that comes from getting your hands dirty, and I don't want you to feel like any task in the church is beneath you, there is a very real sense that if you don't do the things that only you can do, if the highest level leaders in your church aren't focusing on the things that only they can do, then who is doing those things? And the answer is no one. So every leader at every level, honestly, ought to be asking the question, what is the thing that only I can do or that I'm supposed to be doing? And focus most on that. And it's not about, you obviously want servant leaders and who are humble and all those things, but it's a false humility to be stuck getting your hands dirty. And this is exactly the reflection that the apostles have, correct? In the book of Acts. Is it chapter 6? I could be butchering where that is, but where they go, it's not good for us to be waiting tables. I mean, you read that and you go, oh, they're stuck up.
Yeah.
No, they just understood that there's, it wasn't that it was beneath them. It clearly wasn't. They had been doing it. It's that there were things that they would be neglecting. And that's the word that they use. We should not neglect these things in order to wait on tables. And so for this first point, I just want to say, For you to be making decisions at the lowest level and always be in the weeds, what are you neglecting in order to be stuck doing those things?
Yeah.
It's an important question.
So let's sidetrack for a quick second here, Scott, on Acts chapter 6,
Okay.
because normally we would say, yeah, if you're a level 5 board member, then you certainly could also
Way to throw out the pipeline parlance there. Like most people, what do you mean level 5 board member?
If you're a board
there's
member,
a little tease for the pipeline process.
If you're a board member, you could be passing out bulletins on Sunday morning or serving coffee. I mean, in most churches, that's not going to overwhelm you, and it's not going to step on the toes of somebody else. You could do that, and it would be good for you to be out there and doing that kind of thing. But you shouldn't be the person organizing First Impressions ministry, scheduling all of the greeters and the servers,
all the volunteers
in leadership pipeline. Those would be in like level 2, level 3 positions. So you don't need to be a board member to go, I can't do anything else around here.
We don't need ivory tower board members either.
But it shouldn't be something that occupies then a large portion of your time, then taking you away from making those higher level spiritual or strategic decisions for the church.
And so not to push the Act 6 story too much, but this was really the problem. It wasn't that they were distributing the food that was the problem, is that they were not creating a strategy for equitably distributing the food. That was the core issue that was driving the conflict. And so they empowered some leaders who were smart and could figure out a good plan. So they very well could have been still distributing food.
Also that was a daily distribution of food, not a Sunday for an hour distribution of bulletins.
That's true. That's true. But they still could have been pitching in with that and helping, which would have been good. But they weren't like in charge of organizing that and all. At any rate, I don't want to read too much into that story than what's already there. But
if somebody said, Peter, would you grab that basket of bread for me? He would not have said,
he wouldn't be like, I'm busy reading my Bible. I've got scroll time going on.
All right,
let's move on.
Number 1 is fun. Number 2, church leaders are selected for their capacity over their character. And this happens. Let me also kind of preface this. None of these things that we're talking about today, in my experience, probably in yours, Scott, we've never seen a church strategically say, here's how we're going to function.
Here's what we're going to do.
These are subconscious or incidental things that just end up happening. And so we're just trying to give you some little red flags maybe to look for, maybe some pink flags that you can go, maybe we got out of the scope of work here. So church leaders selected for capacity over character. And this is one that commonly happens with people that maybe work in particular professions and have certain life experience or business experience. And they're like, wow, they'd be great board members. And we accidentally, or we don't fully look at the full breadth of their personality and the depth of their character to make sure that, that great business experience is also great spiritual leader experience.
This is a mistake. So as you just said, it's usually like, hey, this guy goes to our church, he runs a business, therefore he's an effective leader. That may very well be true, but what's his character like? He may be a successful businessman, but is he an ethical one? How do his employees feel about him? How does his family feel about him? Has he run a successful business at the expense of his family? That could be a red flag. So capacity is not the only thing that matters. And in fact, this is where toxicity usually happens. So you can make the same mistake in hiring staff or hiring a pastor. Churches will go, well, this guy worked at a big church, or he ran this big ministry or whatever, therefore he must be good. And just looking at their results without looking at their heart is a problem. And to your point, AJ, I don't think anybody does this intentionally. I think it's more accidental. So you just want to be sure that you are paying as close attention to their character as you are their capacity. You can make the opposite mistake, AJ, which isn't on this list, by the way, but you can make the opposite mistake where you go, hey, he's a really good guy. He's got really good character, but he can't lead his way out of a paper bag. That's an equally tragic mistake.
Yeah, right.
You want anybody who's serving in a position of influence, so on your staff, on a board, whatever, leading a ministry, they should be people of both high character and high capacity.
Yep.
They're effective leaders and their characters good.
And maybe they're also a character themselves. We see a lot of characters.
Could be a character. Yeah. Seen a lot of characters in churches.
Number 3, church leaders are selected for their tenure over their qualifications. So qualifications might be character or capacity, but regardless, we're talking about the time existence. And Scott, we see this a lot in politics, especially in my neck of the woods. If you've just lived here for a long time, you're probably leading something in government. And people, I don't know why people are okay with this, but people are okay with this. Probably because people just don't want to be bothered with things. They're like, great, if somebody's going to do it and I don't have to do it, fine with me. But we see this in the church a lot, in one of two ways. Either they've been in a leadership position for a long time and it's just kind of become, they're tenured, or they're elevated to a position because they've been around for a long time. Either one of those, same thing. It's a look at time over capacity or character or qualifications. And again, with good intentions, or not wanting to hurt feelings.
I don't want to make too many generalizations, but in my neck of the woods where I live here in Upper East Tennessee, this is really common because some of these churches have been around since, well, I worked on staff at a church in Virginia when I first started in ministry, that the church is older than this country.
Yeah, we've got some revolutionary churches.
Yeah, that's right. Revolutionary War churches. That's right. Yeah. And so some of the families who attend the church have been a part of that church for literally hundreds of years at this point.
Yeah, 300 years.
And so there's an expectation that they're going to sit in certain positions and have certain titles because of the family has been a part of the church for 100 or 200 or 300 years, right? Like there's just these generations of this family. That is not a good reason to elevate someone. It's a good reason to pay attention to their influence in the church, but you don't want to necessarily put them on your session or on your elder board or whatever, just because they have a last name that is associated with the history of the church. And so I don't want to say this is a regional problem, like it only in small country churches is this an issue. I think it's more common in small country churches, but I think that it can happen in a larger area too. Like think about the Metroplex, AJ. It's so transient that if you have someone who's happened to live there for 20 years, it's like, wow, they've been here 20 years. Everybody else is moving out all the time. They obviously know this area really well, so we should elevate them. So it can happen anywhere. Yeah. But it's just not a good reason to put someone in a position of authority based solely on the fact that they've been around a long time.
Right. Yeah, I think you're right.
On no other reason than that.
It doesn't even have to be multi-generational. Yeah, I think by the time somebody is, in their 40s, 50s, and they've been going to the church 20, 30 years, that's long enough for them to be kind of there. And,
it should go without saying that just because someone's been there a long time doesn't disqualify them.
Right.
They could be a high capacity, high character leader and be long tenured, and they'd be great. But just because this is what we're criticizing, just because they've been there a long time, that's the only reason why they have a particular position.
We could probably sidetrack on this one slightly, Scott, in the consideration of a lot of upper level leaders feel either having a perception, an accurate or inaccurate perception, that there is just nobody else. We don't have anybody better than them, or we don't have enough volunteers, which opens up a whole other episode on volunteer
Mhm.
engagement, increasing volunteer engagement. But sometimes I think sometimes those are more perceptions and not realities. That
Well, it can be a self-fulfilling prophecy,
yeah, sure.
where you go, it's really sort of a you have not because you ask not type
Mhm.
situation.
Yeah.
You don't currently have those leaders, but if you're never rolling anyone off, I actually had this conversation with a church very recently. They were asking, they're moving towards having an elder board, and there was a discussion of how long should they be on the board at a time, and should it be indefinite, whatever. And we had this discussion about if you never roll the elders off, if it's sort of a lifetime appointment, which I've worked with several churches where that's the case, things just tend to go stale. There's never any new blood, and then you're never elevating, you're never sort of building up new elders. That's not good. So there's some health in intentionally rolling people off the board just so that it's a leadership development opportunity to identify and develop
Yeah.
more junior, I guess,
Mhm.
elders,
Yeah,
leaders in the church.
for sure. Yep. All right, moving on. Number 4, church leaders are advocates for comfort more than
Mhm.
the kingdom.
Yep.
So, and this is another one again. We're trying to be gentle in all these, because you almost never see these being intentional. But this is another
Sometimes it
one that
is.
happens. I mean, it's good that this one follows our previous one, because also with long tenured people, you've got long tenured programs or ways of doing things, and it's very predictable. Predictable church is sometimes ineffective church. As far as predictability and just what's going to happen every week, and the same people doing the same old thing. So you end up in a comfort over kingdom scenario. And this would be reflected back in mission creep, vision creep, that we had great ideas and intentions maybe decades ago, same people doing the same thing and maybe making it a little bit easier each year. And now all of a sudden we are not focusing our number one priority on making them mature and disciples of Jesus. Now we're just kind of keeping the place open and having a good sermon every Sunday. So that's when you're in a comfort over kingdom scenario, and it would come back to senior leadership not recognizing that, and realigning your trajectory.
Yeah, we're going to actually revisit this. I'm going to give you a quote from Robert Quinn, and we're going to revisit this in a later episode, but it's worth mentioning here. He says he wrote a book called "Building the Bridge as You Walk on It." It's about organizational change, and he says that in our comfort zone, we can only imitate that which has been done in the past, and everyone is colluding in avoiding the pursuit of excellence. And what that means is, without some sort of external pressure or push or crisis, there's an instinctual desire to sort of close ranks and just protect what is. And this is what's happening. So when we going back to sort of the overall point, AJ, of this episode, so we blame external culture and we go, well, there's all these problems, and that's why things are declining. When the reality is, and this is maybe the most apropos point that we'll make, is that no, the problem is that you've closed ranks to the outside world. You're not allowing those external problems to sort of seep in and instigate change. You've huddled up, and when you huddle up like that and turn inward, everyone then starts to collude in preserving what is versus flipping around outside and start trying to attack what could be. And so there's a intrinsic, instinctual, and natural human response to want to maintain the status quo.
Yeah.
And this is the biggest challenge that leaders must overcome, is the natural and human instinct to protect what is.
Yeah.
I'm not suggesting that I'm contending, AJ, that it is a normal human response to do that.
Yeah.
But you have to push back against that human response in order to survive.
Yeah, to some extent, it's, I think that's what makes maybe the leaders special or unique that reach out to us looking for help, that they're
That's
able
right.
to have that clarity of perception and mind to say, we are kind of stuck in this area, and in order to break out of this orbit, we need an external force, and that might come in the form of, you or I or one of our team members, Scott, giving a church an outside point of view, and then maybe guiding them through a process. So
and saying a hard thing that needs to be heard.
yeah, this should be a point of prayer, I think, for a lot of senior leaders and board level leaders, to not get caught in this. Or if you've just really been doing the same thing the same way for a long time, pray for that clarity of mind, to question, are we doing the right things at this point? Do we need an external force to nudge us out of this orbit so that we can unfreeze the gyroscopes and have a look around a little bit? Maybe there's a better way of doing things. So
right.
Got to give those people credit that come to that conclusion.
For sure. Number 5, last one.
Church leaders.
Go. Sorry.
Edit.
I was like, are you going to go, or am I going to say it?
Church leaders promote personal projects instead of a unified vision. And same qualifier again, probably subconscious, probably unintentional. In the lack of unified and clarified vision, you have a vacuum, and that vacuum gets filled with whatever comes natural. And this is just, again, this is a human nature thing. This is probably happening in your church right now. There's people out there in seats every Sunday that, without understanding your specific mission and vision, they're operating under their own. They're happy coming back Sunday after Sunday because it kind of feels like the alignment is there. And until you clarify and communicate what your true mission and vision is, nobody's ever knowing. They're operating under their own. And which is, that's the unfortunate side effect, Scott, of, a strategic planning process. When you clarify and communicate what our unified mission and vision are, there will be some people that say, oh,
I'm out.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
That's different.
Yeah, I didn't sign up for that.
Yeah. It's not a large percentage, but it happens. That's right. An unintentional consequence of
the alternative is you're not going anywhere.
That's right. Yeah.
Right.
We can either go nowhere together, or we can go somewhere specific with most of us.
That's right. So I've used this analogy before, but I'll use it again. And I've been using it a lot lately in one-on-one calls. So if I talk to you personally, I'm sorry, it may come up again. The best analogy for this I can think of, AJ, is imagine for a moment that you and I, AJ, are in a car, and we have agreed that we're going on a road trip. We're going on a trip somewhere, and we agree on that. There's no disagreement on that. That's similar to churches agreeing on mission. We agree that the mission of the church is to make and mature disciples. We agree on that most fundamental thing. We are in a car and we are going somewhere. But if we never articulate where it is that the car is driving to, what we have done is we've now invited conflict into the car alongside us.
Yeah, right.
But what tends to happen in this situation is that no one has said where they think the car is driving, and so what the destination is. And so I'm in the driver's seat, AJ, and I think we're driving to the beach, and you're in the passenger seat and you think that we're driving to the mountains, and those are not the same destination.
And we know each other well, because I was going to use the exact same 2 options for me and you, Scott. You'd be heading to Disney and I'd be heading to the Rockies. So
that's right. Yeah. Okay. So here we are. We're in the car.
Yeah.
And
we left.
I've Michigan. Not said
we leave from Michigan. We'd be going south for a little while together. And we're like, we're going to the same place.
We're going in the same direction.
But we would reach a point that we have to make a decision.
That's right. And so here's what happens, AJ, is that we never actually have the conversation about the more fundamental conversation about where are we ultimately going. Mm-hmm. What happens is you say you took a wrong turn. You shouldn't have turned here. You should have turned here. No, I turned here because I needed to turn here. I needed to get off on this exit, right? So we start to have, and this is what happens in churches. The conflicts are all on the surface. The conflicts are all on things that seem small. And we go, well, why are we arguing about this? This is not that big of a deal. Because those things aren't that big of a deal. The big deal is that you haven't had the more fundamental conversation on where are we going. And if you are able to resolve the fundamental conflict and get on the same page on where we're driving to, then you solve some of those upper level conflicts. Or if the conflicts do come, at least we're having conflict and discussion in service of a shared ultimate goal.
Yeah.
And so the biggest problem that we see in churches, I think in every church ministry analysis I've written, not everyone, but most of the reports, there is some component in there about this specific problem, that the church lacks a shared dream.
Yeah.
There are competing visions for the future of the church, and it's driving either explicit conflict or, more likely in churches, subconscious conflict and passive aggressive kind of infighting that's not necessarily contentious but present.
Yeah. You've probably agreed on what flavor chips to have along the way. What kind of snacks are we going to have? Where are we going to stop for gas? Make those decisions without ever really looking at what's the destination.
Where are we going? Yeah. And then it's when those ultimate decisions have to be made, AJ. That's where the conflict ultimately comes, and that's when church splits happen. That's when pastors get fired. That's when those things happen, because we didn't agree on the destination. We agreed on the mission, but not on the vision. We agreed on what it is we're supposed to do, but not where it's going. And when we don't do that, that's what causes churches to decline and die ultimately.
Yeah. The road trip to nowhere.
That's right.
Well, this is a good topic. I hope that everybody appreciates this week. And if you've got comments, we'd love to hear from you. You can always email us at leadership@malforsgroup.com. You can catch us online at our website at malforsgroup.com, and various social media presence as well, if you'd like to talk with us there. Unity in the body, Scott, it's a big deal, and communication is a big deal, and there's a tool for that. And Faith Street.
You're getting so good at these segues, AJ.
Faith Street can help.
My hat's off to you. Yes, thanks again to our sponsor for this episode, Faith Street. Check them out. It's you need tools to help you be effective in building community, and we ought not rely on secular companies that don't care about church leaders. Ultimately, you should use a tool that's built by church leaders for church leaders. So check out Faith Street. Go to faithstreet.com/Malfers, faithstreet.com/Malfers, MALPHURS. You qualify for 20% off by going to that link and checking it out. See if it's a good fit. May work for your church, may not be a fit for your church. We just want you to check it out.
Thanks for being with us again. This is episode 89 of the Church Revitalization Podcast. And so you can read today's companion article at malforsgroup.com/89. And we'll be back with you again next week. Blessings on your ministries.